The day everything changed. The world was watching when Elon Musk made his announcement. In a single day, 10,000 jobs were gone. The headlines screamed about it. News channels played endless clips of shocked workers leaving their offices with boxes in their arms, faces pale, eyes lost. It was a decision that shook not just an industry, but the idea of stability itself. People everywhere began asking the same question: if this could happen to them, who was safe anymore? The air was heavy with fear. Many called it bold, others called it cruel, but no one could ignore it. And in the middle of all this noise, Sundar Pichai was quietly listening. He sat alone in his office that evening. The lights dimmed, his phone buzzing non-stop with messages from reporters and advisors, but he let it buzz. His thoughts were somewhere else. He remembered his own childhood in a small house in Chennai, where the electricity cut off often, where the family had to wait for hours just to use a telephone. He thought of how his father saved for years to buy him a ticket to America. Sundar had lived through struggle, and he knew what losing a job meant to families. Behind every headline, he saw mothers, fathers, children, rent bills, and grocery lists. He saw not numbers but lives, and yet he also knew the world was changing faster than ever. Companies were under pressure. Artificial intelligence was rewriting the rules. Efficiency was the new god in Silicon Valley. Every CEO was being asked the same question: how much can you cut? How much can you save? How ruthless are you willing to be? Sundar felt the weight of those expectations pressing down on him. The board wanted answers. The investors wanted proof of strength. The employees wanted safety. He was caught in the middle of a storm, but he stayed silent, thinking. Outside, people were whispering about what he would do. Would he follow Elon Musk's path? Would he cut thousands too? Prove that he was tough? That he could play the same brutal game? Or would he take another road? No one knew. But as the hours passed, Sundar's mind began to settle on one truth. He could not lead by fear. He believed in something different. He believed in respect, humility, resilience, and kindness, and he knew that in times like these, when everyone else expected blood, true strength meant something else. But strength does not always look like softness. It does not always sound gentle. Sundar's decision would surprise everyone, and it would not come without cost. The easy choice would have been to copy Musk, to show the world that he too could act fast, cold, and decisive. The hard choice would test him, test his people, and even test the future of the company itself. He stared at the glowing skyline outside his window, the city lights flickering like tiny signals in the dark. He whispered to himself, "There has to be another way." That night, he called a small group of trusted leaders into a private meeting. The atmosphere was heavy. One of them said, "Elon just saved billions. If we don't act now, Wall Street will eat us alive." Another said, "People already expect cuts. If we don't cut, we'll look weak." Sundar listened, nodding slowly, but his eyes told a different story. When the room went quiet, he spoke in a calm voice. "We are not weak when we choose humanity. We are weak when we forget it." The words landed softly, but they carried a sharp edge. No one replied because no one expected him to say that. The room was tense. One executive leaned forward and asked, "So what's your plan, Sundar? What will you do?" And Sundar paused. He thought of the workers he had seen in the news, their tears, their despair. He thought of his own father's trembling hands holding that ticket to America. And then he said slowly, "I will not take 10,000 jobs. I will try something that no one believes will work." The room erupted with questions, doubts, even fear, but Sundar stayed steady. He knew the path ahead would not just change his company, it could change everything. And so the story begins not with a cut, but with a choice. A choice that would set Sundar Pichai against the tide of Silicon Valley, against the expectations of investors, and even against some of his closest advisors. He was stepping into unknown territory, guided only by his belief that respect and kindness were not weaknesses, but hidden strengths, waiting to be proven. He was about to make a decision that would either save thousands of families or destroy his own leadership forever. As he walked out of that meeting, the hallways were silent, almost too quiet. He could feel eyes watching him, waiting for his next move. His phone buzzed again with another alert. Elon Musk defends massive layoffs, says future demands sacrifice. Sundar stared at the screen for a long moment, then switched it off. His heart was beating faster than usual, and he knew the days ahead would test him more than ever before. But somewhere deep inside he felt a spark. The same spark that had carried him from a small town in India to the heart of Silicon Valley. The spark of resilience. The spark of faith. The spark of a man about to do something unthinkable. And just when he thought he was ready to face what came next, a message appeared on his private inbox. It was short, only one line, but it froze him in place. It was from someone he never expected. The words were simple but heavy with meaning. I know what you're planning and you're making a mistake. The letter no one expected, Sundar sat back in his chair, staring at the message on his screen. The room around him seemed to shrink. The letters were simple, but they carried the weight of something larger, like a shadow entering his quiet world. I know what you're planning and you're making a mistake. No name, no signature, just a single line. At first, Sundar thought it might be a prank or a careless message from someone outside the circle, but his instincts told him otherwise. This felt personal. Whoever wrote it had knowledge that only a few in his closest group knew. It meant someone in his circle was already doubting him, perhaps even preparing to stand against him. He closed the laptop slowly, almost as if shutting it could erase the words from his mind, but they stayed echoing louder with each passing second. For years, Sundar had led with calmness, with quiet confidence that drew people to trust him. He was not known for anger, nor for rash choices. Yet tonight he felt a spark of unease. Something unusual for him. He began to wonder who it could be. Was it one of the executives from the meeting, too afraid of the board's reaction? Was it someone from the outside, a rival planting seeds of fear? Or worse, was it someone who once respected him but no longer believed in his way? As he walked through the empty corridors of the office, the silence was almost haunting. The walls were lined with posters of past successes, reminders of how far the company had come. Innovation, progress, ambition, words that once carried fire now felt heavy with expectation. Sundar thought of the workers, the engineers who coded through the night, the designers who put their hearts into every small detail, the support teams who answered calls when no one else would. Behind each desk was a story, a family, a dream. He knew layoffs would tear those stories apart, but this anonymous voice was whispering that he was wrong, that his choice would backfire. The next morning, Sundar gathered his team again, this time in a smaller room with no cameras, no assistants. His voice was steady, though the weight of the message still lingered inside him. Someone told me I'm making a mistake, he began. The room froze. Eyes darted around, a few faces grew pale. I don't know who said it, Sundar continued, but maybe they are right. Maybe kindness will not survive in this world. Maybe people will call it weakness, but I will still try. He let the words hang in the air. He did not accuse anyone. He did not demand loyalty. Instead, he offered his truth, raw and simple. There was a long silence. Then one of his senior leaders leaned forward, her voice soft but strong. Sundar, kindness is not weakness. But we need to show the world what kindness can do. No one will believe until they see proof. Sundar met her eyes and nodded. He realized that this was the real challenge. Not only to make a different choice, but to prove that it could work in the ruthless world of Silicon Valley. He had to find a way to protect jobs, keep innovation alive, and still show investors that the company was strong. It felt impossible, but impossible was where change was born. For the next few days, Sundar locked himself away with a small team of thinkers and dreamers. They explored options that no one else dared to try. Instead of cutting workers, they began looking for ways to empower them, to give them new roles in building the future. Projects that were shelved came back to life. Ideas that had been ignored were re-examined. Sundar wanted to show that the greatest resource of the company was not money, not machines, not algorithms. It was people. The energy in those rooms was electric, filled with sparks of creativity and hope. But outside, the pressure was growing. The media asked daily when he would announce layoffs. Investors demanded clarity. Wall Street was waiting like a predator. Then came another message. This time not anonymous. It arrived as a direct call from a board member, his voice sharp, carrying the impatience of someone who had seen too much risk. Sundar, he said, I respect you, but you cannot delay forever. The market wants blood. If you don't give it to them, they will turn on you. And when they do, you will not only lose your job, you will lose your legacy. Sundar listened quietly, his heart heavy. He knew the man was not lying. The world did not reward patience, it rewarded speed and numbers. But Sundar also knew that some legacies are not written by following the crowd, but by daring to stand against it. That night, Sundar walked alone through the campus. The streets lit with soft lights, the buildings empty and still. He thought of the workers who would return tomorrow, their faces tired but full of hope, unaware of the battles being fought above them. He wondered if they would still believe in him if he failed. He wondered if his own children would one day ask him why he didn't fight harder. The fear was real, but so was the fire inside him. And as he stood in the quiet night, he whispered again to himself, "There has to be another way." The next morning, he was ready to speak. But before he could, another surprise awaited him. A sealed envelope had been left on his desk. No email this time, no phone call, no digital trace. Just paper folded carefully, carrying only one sentence inside. "If you choose this path, you will not stand alone." The hidden Ali Sundar held the envelope in his hands for a long time, longer than he expected. It felt strange to see words written on paper in a world where everything lived inside screens and machines. The letters were curved, almost careful, and the message was short. "If you choose this path, you will not stand alone." Unlike the warning before, this one carried warmth. It was not a threat. It was a promise. But who could have written it? Sundar searched for clues in the handwriting, the texture, even the fold of the paper. Nothing gave it away. Yet deep inside, he felt a quiet surge of hope. Someone believed in him, someone close enough to leave this on his desk but careful enough to stay unseen. As he stepped into the day, he carried the letter in his pocket like a secret flame. In the conference rooms, where charts and graphs tried to push him toward the same path as everyone else, he touched the folded paper and reminded himself that there was still another way. The pressure was growing louder by the hour. Headlines shouted about Elon Musk's bold move. Analysts praised the decisiveness, and investors whispered that Sundar was falling behind. But beneath all the noise, the thought that he was not alone gave him strength. Leadership is heavy when carried alone, but lighter when shared, even with a hidden voice. Days passed, and Sundar began noticing small signs around him. A team of young engineers worked late on a project that everyone else had written off. Yet they carried a new kind of energy, as if someone had lit a fire under them. A mid-level manager defended his team against budget cuts with unusual courage, saying, "We can build more with less if you let us try." Even a janitor greeted Sundar one night with unexpected words. "Don't let them push you to forget us." It felt as though invisible threads were pulling together, weaving a quiet movement inside the company. Sundar realized that while some feared his choice, others were quietly rooting for it, perhaps inspired by the very whispers that had reached him through the letter. Still, not everyone was on his side. In a tense boardroom meeting, one senior executive slammed his hand on the table and said, "You're gambling with the future of this company. Kindness doesn't pay the bills. Numbers do." The words echoed in the room, sharp and cold. Sundar did not argue back. Instead, he let silence fill the space. Then he spoke softly. "Numbers will never love us back. But people will, and people build the future." The executive shook his head in frustration, but Sundar noticed something else. A few faces in the room lowered their eyes, as if secretly agreeing but too afraid to admit it. That evening, Sundar walked to a small cafe near the campus. He rarely went there, but tonight he wanted to feel the world outside the pressure of corporate walls. The place was quiet. Only a few customers scattered across the tables. As he sat with his tea, he noticed a folded napkin placed on his table when he wasn't looking. On it were words written in the same careful hand as the letter. "Keep going. They don't see what you see yet." Sundar's chest tightened. Whoever this hidden ally was, they were close, watching, leaving signs of encouragement like breadcrumbs in the dark. He thought about the workers again, about the families whose futures depended on his choice. The hidden ally reminded him that his vision was not madness. It was simply ahead of its time. He began to see that this was not only his fight, it was the fight of everyone who still believed humanity had a place in the age of machines. But he also knew something dangerous. If this ally was close enough to leave notes unseen, they were also close enough to be in the circle of power. That meant trust was both a gift and a risk. The next day, Sundar stood before his wider leadership team. His voice was steady, but inside him his pulse raced. "We will not follow the path of mass cuts," he declared. The room shifted uneasily. "Instead, we will reinvest in our people. We will shift, we will retrain, we will innovate from within. This is not about survival. It is about transformation." The room erupted with noise, some in shock, some in anger, some in silent approval. Sundar stood firm, his heart echoing the words of the letter. "You will not stand alone." But as he left the room, his phone buzzed with another message. This time it was blunt, colder than before. You are walking into a trap. They are waiting for you to fail. The air seemed to grow heavier around him. Sundar knew the battle had just begun. The silent storm, the warning replayed in Sundar's mind again and again. You are walking into a trap. They are waiting for you to fail. He could not ignore it, even though he wanted to believe in the quiet hope planted by the hidden ally. The trap could mean many things: financial sabotage, internal betrayal, or a coordinated attack from outside forces. In Silicon Valley, failure was not always the result of bad decisions. Sometimes it was designed, carefully built by those who had the most to lose when someone challenged the system. Sundar felt the ground beneath him grow unsteady, but he refused to let fear dictate his choices. Within a week, the trap began to take shape. Rumors spread across the company that Sundar was not strong enough to lead, that he was avoiding the hard decisions, that his softness was putting everyone at risk. Anonymous blogs appeared online filled with half-truths and twisted stories, painting him as indecisive and weak. Investors whispered to journalists that the company was drifting, that leadership had lost its grip. The stock price dipped, and headlines screamed that Sundar's refusal to follow Musk's example was proof of incompetence. The storm was building, silent at first but now roaring across screens and conversations everywhere. Inside the company walls, the pressure was worse. Teams began to fracture. Some leaders openly questioned his strategy in meetings, while others stayed silent, their loyalty hidden in quiet eyes but never spoken aloud. Every decision he made, no matter how small, was magnified and doubted. Sundar walked through hallways filled with smiles that felt thinner than paper. Trust was evaporating, and he could almost hear it dissolve in the air. He wondered if this was the trap. Not a single event, but a slow erosion of faith designed to break him from the inside out. Yet Sundar refused to bend. Instead of retreating, he chose to face his people directly. One evening, he walked into a crowded cafeteria where hundreds of employees gathered for dinner. The room went silent when they saw him. Without a microphone, without notes, he spoke in his calm voice. I know you hear the stories. I know some of you are afraid. But I want you to know something. You are not numbers. You are not costs. You are the reason we exist, and I will fight to protect that. For a moment, the silence deepened, and Sundar wondered if his words had fallen into emptiness. Then slowly applause began at one table, then another, until the entire room was filled with clapping hands, some even standing. The sound was not loud like a stadium. It was steady, like a heartbeat. But applause could not erase the storm outside. The next day, a major investor pulled funding from a critical project, citing lack of confidence in leadership. It was a direct strike, a message to the board that Sundar's path was too dangerous. The board called an emergency meeting, their voices sharp, their patience thin. One of them said coldly, "You are risking everything we built. If this continues, we will be forced to consider new leadership." Sundar listened, his face calm, but inside he felt the sting of betrayal. He knew the trap was closing, not from rivals outside, but from the very people who sat at the same table as him. That night, he sat alone again, looking out at the city lights. The silence was heavy, but he did not feel empty. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the letter that said, "You will not stand alone." He read it again and again, searching for strength between the lines. Whoever had written it, they believed in him, and sometimes belief from even one person was enough to carry a man through fire. Then, as if fate wanted to test him further, a new message arrived. This one was neither cold nor warm, but full of urgency. "Meet me tomorrow at dawn. I can show you who is behind the trap." No name, no location yet, just a promise that more would follow. Sundar stared at the words, his heart racing. The storm was not just rumor and betrayal anymore. Someone was ready to reveal the truth. The meeting at dawn. The night stretched endlessly as Sundar waited for morning. He barely slept, his mind turning over the possibilities of who had reached out and what they might reveal. Dawn came quietly, the sky painted in soft shades of gray, and Sundar left his home with no entourage, no car full of security, only a simple jacket and a quiet determination. He walked through the still streets until he reached the old railway bridge just outside the city, a place forgotten by most, where the hum of Silicon Valley seemed to fade into silence. It was there, standing in the pale morning light, that a figure waited. The person was hooded, their face half hidden, but their voice was steady when they spoke. "You were right to resist them," the figure said. "But you are walking into a carefully designed collapse. Sundar's breath hung in the cold air. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The figure lowered the hood, and to Sundar's surprise, it was someone he knew. An engineer who had worked at the company for years. Quiet, loyal, never one to draw attention. Sundar remembered seeing them late at night in the labs fixing problems others gave up on. "They think you are too soft," the engineer said, "so they are making you look weak. The rumors, the investors pulling out, even some of the board members. It's coordinated. They want you cornered until you choose the easy path. Mass cuts." Sundar felt the weight of the words settle on him. This was the trap. It wasn't just doubt or fear. It was a plan carefully laid to break his resistance. The engineer continued, "But not everyone agrees with them. There are many of us who believe in you, who believe that people are not just numbers. We have been waiting for a leader to stand against the tide. That is why I left you the notes." Sundar's heart tightened. The hidden ally had been close all along, working quietly under his nose, unnoticed yet unwavering. "Why me?" Sundar asked.
"Why risk so much to help me?"
The engineer looked at him with eyes that carried both exhaustion and hope. "Because I know what it feels like to be seen as replaceable, and I know you are the only one who refuses to see us that way." As the sun slowly rose, casting golden light across the bridge, Sundar felt the clarity he had been searching for. The trap was real, but so was the support hidden beneath the surface. People were waiting for him to prove that a different kind of leadership could survive in this ruthless world. He realized he was not only fighting for jobs, but for the soul of leadership itself. Before leaving, the engineer placed a small folder in Sundar's hands. "Inside is proof," they whispered. "Emails, documents, plans. You will see how deep this goes. But once you open it, there is no turning back. You will be forced to confront them head on." Sundar gripped the folder tightly, his pulse quickening. He had asked for another way, and now the path was opening. But it was lined with fire. He walked away from the bridge as the city came alive behind him, the folder heavy in his hands. Inside those pages lay the names of those who wanted him to fail, and the evidence of how they had set the storm against him. His next move would not only decide his own fate, but the future of thousands of people. And as he reached his office, he whispered to himself, "This is no longer about surviving. This is about truth." He placed the folder on his desk, staring at it for a long moment before opening it. The first page revealed something he had not expected. The betrayal was closer than he ever imagined. The final test, the folder lay open on Sundar's desk like a wound. The first page carried words that shook him. Notes of strategy meetings he had never been told about, meetings where his own board members discussed replacing him. As he turned the pages, the picture grew darker. There were leaked emails to journalists, designed to spread doubt about his leadership. There were hidden agreements with investors, offering them rewards if they pushed hard enough for layoffs. Each page was proof that the storm around him was not natural. It had been carefully built, brick by brick, by the very people he was supposed to trust. Sundar sat still for a long time, his hands pressed together, his mind fighting against the weight of betrayal. He thought of all the years he had given to the company, all the nights spent in quiet focus, all the moments when he had chosen patience over anger, humility over pride, and now, those very qualities had been twisted into weapons against him. But as he stared at the folder, he also remembered the engineer's voice at dawn, the cafeteria full of employees clapping, the janitor's quiet words, the spark of belief in ordinary eyes. And he knew then that his fight was not against numbers or rumors. It was against the idea that kindness had no place in leadership. The next board meeting was unlike any before. The room was heavy with tension, the faces around the table guarded, waiting to see how Sundar would respond to their growing pressure. One member leaned forward, his tone sharp. "The market is losing faith. We need action, and we need it now. Layoffs are the only way to show strength." Sundar let the silence hang before he placed the folder on the table. Slowly, he slid it across for everyone to see. "Strength," he said softly, "is not built on fear. And these pages prove who has been building fear in this company." The room shifted, eyes darting, whispers rising. Sundar had not raised his voice, but the truth he carried landed heavier than any threat. Some faces grew pale as they read the documents, realizing their words and schemes had been exposed. Others looked at him with new respect, understanding now that he had seen through the storm. Sundar did not gloat. He did not attack. He simply said, "I will not cut 10,000 jobs to save numbers on a chart. I will save the people who build the future." And if that cost me my title, then so be it. His voice was steady, almost quiet, but it carried a force that could not be denied. For a moment the room was silent, then fractured. Some argued louder, demanding control while others shifted in their seats, unwilling to stand against the truth laid bare. Sundar realized in that moment that leadership was not about pleasing everyone. It was about holding steady when the storm raged hardest. And though the board was divided, something deeper was happening outside those walls. Word of his stand was spreading across the company. Workers began to rally. Teams offered ideas for cost-saving innovations. Managers pledged to find new ways forward without cutting lives apart. A wave was forming, quiet but undeniable, built not on fear but on trust. Days later, the world outside learned the truth. Headlines shifted from Sundar Pichai weak under pressure to Pichai refuses layoffs, challenges Silicon Valley's ruthless playbook. Some critics still called him naive, but others began to see his choice as bold, even revolutionary. Investors who once doubted him began to return, not because he bent to them, but because they saw the fire of resilience burning stronger than before. Alone in his office one evening, Sundar looked out at the city lights once more. He knew the battle was not over. There would always be more storms, more traps, more tests. But he also knew something unshakable. Respect, humility, resilience, and kindness were not weaknesses. They were the quiet strengths that could outlast any storm. He smiled faintly, remembering the letter that said, "You will not stand alone." And he realized it had been true all along. As he turned off the lights and walked away, another message was waiting on his desk, written on the same kind of folded paper. It carried only 4 words, but they promised a future still full of challenges and hope. This is just beginning.